Continuing on with our expectations videos for each NHL team heading into next season, in today's video we have the Florida Panthers, and this is a team who has a lot higher expectations than they've probably ever had, and I'm very excited to see how they play. So with that being said, let's get right into the video. Last year was a pretty up and down season for the Florida Panthers. They got off to a pretty shaky start, and really up until the trade deadline, they weren't really one of the top teams in the league. But after that, they absolutely turned it up and went on an insane run, making them so close to being a playoff team. And this was a team I really wanted to see make it in. Seeing them come this far and everything they were able to accomplish in such a short amount of time was really amazing to see. And I'm sure lots of people around the league wanted to see these guys make it in as well. And I think now, heading into next season, the expectations are very high. And if Florida can sustain the play that they've had even somewhat from the second half of last season and play that way throughout the whole regular season, they will be a playoff team. There's no doubt in my mind. They finished last year with a record of 44-30-8 for 4th in the Atlantic Division with 96 points, 1 point out of a playoff spot. You think back to the start of the season, if they would have won even one more game, they would have been in the playoffs. That just shows you how every game really does truly matter in the regular season. And I think next year Florida's really going to realize that and just play their hearts out throughout all 82 games and have a really consistent season as opposed to the up and down year they had this previous season. Their leading point scorer obviously was Alex Barkov. He's the best player on this team. He is their superstar. One of, if not the best two-way players in the game, putting up 78 points. It was a fantastic year for Barkov, and their leading goal scorer was Vincent Trocheck with 31 goals. It was a really well-rounded attack for the Florida Panthers last year. You had a couple of guys with 60-plus points, and that's something that's always good to see, as opposed to having one guy with like 97 points and then the rest with like 50. This team is well-rounded, and they really don't have a guy you have to target, because on any given night, someone on this team can really have an amazing game. You have guys like Dadonov, Trocheck, now you add in Mike Hoffman, Barkov, Huberto. All those guys can really have a good game any given night. So I think that is what is scary about this Florida team, the depth in the top 6 that they have, and there's not really one player you can target to shut down. So all in all, it's going to be really exciting to see how they play next season, and I'm very interested to see how Hoffman fits with this team, and just in general how this team fares as a whole heading into next season. Now taking a look at the off-season transactions for the Florida Panthers, besides from that Mike Hoffman trade, it was relatively quiet. Radim Vrbata did decide to retire, but getting Mike Hoffman, that is a significant upgrade, and he's going to bring a lot to this top 6 and take a lot of pressure off guys like Trocheck, Barkov, and Huberto, and it just gives you another guy you have to target and try to shut down when you're playing against the Florida Panthers, and it's going to make them all that much more scary to play against. I would have liked to have seen them maybe trade out Nick Bjugstad, because I think you have a lot of good rookies coming up, and there should be an opening in that top 6, but right now there really isn't. And if you were to trade Nick Bjugstad for maybe a solid defenseman, you could just bolster up your defensive depth and then maybe slot in a rookie into that top 6 next year, as I have two guys I'm going to talk about later on in this video that I really do think are capable of being top 6 forwards as soon as next season, but there really just isn't any space for them in the top 6, so the highest I could see them playing really is third line minutes, which is still good. It really does make the depth scoring on this team very scary, but sometimes rookies playing on third lines don't always work out, and some players are just more suited for being a top 6 player, and if you're not going to have them in the top 6, just don't have them in there at all. So I would have liked to see them maybe move out a guy like Bjugstad, but all in all, it was a really solid offseason for Florida, as they kept most of the team staying pat, and they did bring in a guy like Mike Hoffman, who's going to bring a lot to this team. Now taking a look at my lineup predictions for the Florida Panthers, that top line I have Evgeny Dadonov, Alex Barkov, and Nick Bjugstad. You could play Bjugstad at center, but I think he's best suited as a wing. I love the way Dadonov played last year. That was a fantastic signing, bringing him in. He looked like a star for the Florida Panthers. Then obviously Barkov, in my opinion, in a couple of years could be a top 5 center in the NHL. So that is a really solid top line. And then on that second line, you have Mike Hoffman, the new acquisition, Vincent Trocheck, who in my opinion is one of the most underrated players in the NHL. Quietly posted 70-plus points last season, 31 goals, and not many people talk about him, and I definitely think he's going to get a lot more recognition because he should be able to sustain the season that he had. And then you have Jonathan Huberto as well, who's always good for 60-plus points. So that top 6 is really scary, and there's a lot of good goal scoring in that team, and you don't really have a weak link in that top 6. The worst player in that top 6, you could argue, is Nick Bjugstad, and he's still a pretty solid player. So it really is a fantastic top 6 for the Florida Panthers. And the bottom 6 is pretty good as well. You have Jared McCann, Henrik Borgstrom, and McGinn. And this is something that a lot of people might not agree with. I don't have Derek McKenzie in this lineup. I think his days are numbered. Obviously, he is their captain, but I think that should be given to Aaron Ekblad anytime soon, or Alex Barkov, whatever way they want to go there. But I definitely think Borgstrom is NHL ready, and he will be playing for the Florida Panthers next season. And he's a guy who I think would benefit more in a top 6 role, but I don't think he would do all that bad in a bottom 6 role as a third line center as well, giving him some power play minutes here or there, because you could have a guy like Mike Hoffman playing the point and then slide Borgstrom up to a wing for the power play. So I think he will get his fair share of minutes. He is going to play in this team. And then you have Vetrano, Malgin, and Colton Sevier, a very solid fourth line. And then I have Owen Tippett with a star beside him, because I think he is ready to be an NHL player. He's a fantastic goal scorer at a junior level, and I think that is going to transition, but there isn't really a spot for him on this team. He's a guy who I don't think would play well in a bottom 6 role. Like I said earlier in the video, some players are just better suited playing top 6 or not playing at all, and that's why I want them to kind of maybe trade a top 6 player, and I think that player would be Bjugstad if you were to get a solid defenseman there and really bolster up your defense, and then put Tippett on maybe the second line with Hoffman and Trocheck, and then move Huberdeau up to the first line. I think that would be fantastic. There's a lot of things you can do with this lineup, but if there isn't a trade moved or someone isn't traded in that top 6, I don't see Owen Tippett playing on the roster throughout the majority of the season, and he could see some AHL time throughout the majority of the year. But I definitely think as soon as next season, he will be on the Florida Panthers roster getting some minutes, and I definitely think he's ready, and I'm excited to see how the rookies play. Borgstrom and Tippett are some pretty underrated prospects that not many people talk about, but really could make a huge impact for this team as soon as next season. So all in all, it is a very solid forward group for the Florida Panthers. Now taking a look at Florida's blue line, I'm a big fan of this, and I think if Keith Yandle can keep up the point production he had last year, if Aaron Ekblad can bounce back, because I think he's capable of way more than what he did last season, this could be one of the best blue lines in the Eastern Conference. You have Yandle and Ekblad on that top pairing. Keith Yandle is a guy who I think could drop off anytime soon, but is definitely still a suitable top 4 defenseman. Then on that second pairing, you have Michael Matheson and Mark Pysyk, and I do like that second pairing as well. I'm a fan of Matheson. I think he's pretty underrated. And then you have Mac Weegar and Petrovic, and I have Mikosian on there because I think if Petrovic isn't to play well and has a bad training camp and has a pretty slow start to the season, Mikosian could take that spot away and play with Mac Weegar. And if Mac Weegar isn't playing well as either, and he doesn't have a good training camp or preseason, we could see him taking over from Mikosian as well. So a very deep defense core that I don't really see having a huge superstar unless Aaron Ekblad is to finally take that next step and solidify himself as one of the best defensemen in the NHL. And it would be fantastic if he would be able to do that, because that just makes his team even more scary. And then in goal is kind of where the question mark lies with this team. What is the state of Roberto Luongo? He's getting up there in age. I don't know how many years he has left in the tank. If he is still a suitable number 1 goaltender that can play 50 to 60 games, that would be fantastic, but I'm not really sure if he is. And I think we could see him playing around 45 games and kind of splitting the year with James Reimer, because I don't think James Reimer is suited as a good starting goaltender right now. And if they were to go out and get a better goaltender and upgrade, I think that would do wonders for the team. But I'm not really sure if this is something to worry about, but it definitely is the weak link of this team right now, especially with James Reimer not really being a starter and Luongo getting up there in age. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but they should be able to hold their own for next season. But next summer, I think goaltending is something that the Florida Panthers will certainly address. Now taking a look at my player stats predictions, and I have to say this every video because there's always a couple comments of people saying I'm ridiculous for thinking they're going to play in all 82 games. I know every player isn't going to. This is just their points per 82 games if they were to play in all 82. I have Barkov leading the way with 29 goals and 56 assists for 85 points. And getting 85 points from one of the best two-way players in the game is certainly a plus to have, because you have a guy who's so good in his defensive zone and he can give you 85 points. That is an MVP caliber player right there, and I think next year Barkov will solidify himself as one of the top players in the NHL. Then I have Vincent Trocheck, 30 goals, 47 assists for 77 points, and I think he'll get a lot more recognition next season. He did have 70 plus points last year. I'm not sure why he doesn't get talked about all that much, but it probably is because he plays in Florida. And when you do think of Florida, you obviously just talk about Barkov and Ekblad. Then I have Huberto, 25 goals, 47 assists for 72 points. Consistently, I think he's able to put up 70 plus points. I think that's the type of player he is. I'm not quite sure what his ceiling is and how much better he can do than that, but I definitely think he is good for 70 plus points. Then I have Dadonov, 30 goals and 39 assists for 69 points, having another solid season for the Florida Panthers since coming over from the KHL. Then I have the newly acquired Mike Hoffman, 29 goals and 31 assists for 60 points. And that's something they didn't have last year. Radim Verbata certainly wasn't giving them those kind of numbers, so certainly an upgrade in that regard. And then I have Ekblad with 11 goals and 42 assists for 53 points, really bouncing back as he will be the quarterback of that power play. And now you have a guy who's really good on the power play, like Mike Hoffman. I think that power play percentage is only going to go up, and Ekblad's point total definitely could benefit from that. So this is kind of just what I think it could look like if everyone was to play in all 82 games. I know they're not going to, but I think it will be a well-balanced attack, and you're going to get a lot of good point production from a lot of your top 6 players. And now finally, giving you guys my final expectations for the Florida Panthers next season. I have them finishing with the record of 47, 30, and 5 for 99 points, 4th in the Atlantic Division once again, but this year I do have them making the postseason in the 1st or 2nd wildcard spot. And I don't know what they are going to be able to accomplish when they do make the playoffs, but just getting there I think would be a huge step in the right direction. And then next year you can really work on tooling and retooling things to really make them a Stanley Cup contender. But getting into the playoffs is the first step, and I think they're going to really accomplish that next season and solidify themselves as a really powerhouse in the Eastern Conference, and make sure that the Atlantic Division isn't only a 3-team division with Toronto, Boston, and Tampa Bay. And this is a team that really could, in my opinion, compete with Boston for that 3rd spot. Leading point scorer, I have Barkov with 85 points and Trocheck and Dadonov with 30 goals leading the way. You guys seen that in the player stats predictions, but all in all, I'm excited to watch this team. It should be very fun. There's still some question marks on where Borgstrom and Tappet will play, how the goaltending will do, but all in all, a very solid team, and I certainly think they will be a playoff team next season. So that is going to do it for this video. I really hope you guys did enjoy. Make sure you let me know down in the comment section, what do you think the Florida Panthers are capable of next season? Will they make the playoffs, and what will they do when they get there? So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.